with the music category, we are going to talk about a single or an album. So, Matthew, what do you have for us with music?
Music, I'm gonna have to go with Norma Jean Polish Similar album. That is, I'm a big Norma Jean fan for anybody that knows or not. But
oh yeah,
and I've followed them since Bless the Martyr, Kiss the Child. But I really got heavy into them whenever they put out Wrongdoers. But Polar Similar from front to back is just one of those albums that really, really meant a lot to me. I was going through a rough time at the time when I heard it. And
when did it come out?
I believe it came out in and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's like 2017 or 18, I believe.
No, I'm just kidding. I don't know.
I really don't know, so I could be
fairly
wrong.
recent, though.
I remember.
It's still kind of recent. It's like a few years. They just put out a new album last year called All Hail. Mm-hmm. So
that one was great.
That one was a fantastic album too. So I was really excited for that. I got to see them play it live at a venue in Tyler called Crossroads, and they played some stuff off of that. But they killed it, honestly, and they're still one of my favorite bands today. So Polar Similar, for sure, front to back. I think the music on it's fantastic. The recording's fantastic. I believe they have a different lineup now, but the lineup on that album is pretty sick. I believe the drummer now plays for Every Time I Die, and I'm trying to remember who else was. I can't remember who else it was, but the lineup, because Norma Jean they view themselves as a collective, so they've been through multiple member changes over the years. But
oh yeah,
I think
they
that
even
was
had the lead singer from the
I think that was
point.
He started off with him, and then he did Bless Martyr, Kiss the Child, and then Corey came in and during Oh God, the Aftermath, and just went from there. I think Corey is the longest lasting member, I believe, as far as because he's been on from Oh God, the Aftermath all the way to All Hail. So I think it's really cool how they still keep their sound and be able to have different members but still keep their sound. And then all the members that are in it, they're fantastic players, and so they're killing it right now. And there was some stuff that happened on Facebook with them when all this stuff happened, but I don't worry about that. I mean, any of that drama stuff, So but I still love that album. I love their new album, they came out with, but that album just kind of strikes a chord with me just because I remember the time and place I was at when I heard that album from front to back.
I totally have that experience with a lot of albums that I listen to. I'll be like, oh, that immediately takes me back to college. Yeah. That immediately takes me back to high school or something like that. And I'm just like, that's a really cool thing to do. So what kind of experience does this album kind of bring, and what are some of the singles that jumped out at you while listening to it?
They put out the first single they put out for it was 1,000,000 Watts, and it was just kick ass from the get go. The video came out and it was sick, and I was a big fan of it. I think my favorite song on that album though is Reaction, just because of the lyrical content of it. It's more like about the way I took it was more like when I was dealing with an emotionally abusive relationship with someone, and it was just really hard for me at that time. But I heard that song, and then it was like one of those things you can really relate when they hit the nail on the head with a song that you at the specific time you're going through something, and that song comes out, and I listened to it, and I was floored from the get-go. Like I started being able to, music is such a big part of my life that, even if it is like a song about something sad or something, something that someone deals with, where it's relatable to everybody. And but I think that that really kind of pushed me to go on forward and really pursue getting past that point in life and progressing. And I think it was really cool how that song kind of changed it up for me. There's another song on the album. It's the last song on the album called The Nexus. And it's like 13 minutes long.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, it's a long song, but all the build up and the structure of the song is fantastic. Like it's very slow, sluggish, kind of like stoner rock a little bit, but it's just heavy hitting. And I really love the ending of it. The ending, they jam for about like a good solid 2-3 minutes on the end, just playing that riff. And it's really cool how they did it. I think the way the album was put together was fantastic. So
for sure. I mean, I've been following them, not as hardcore, as I'd hope, but I've been listening to them pretty regularly over the years when they put out new music, and I'm always impressed. Even got to see them live for the first time, I think a year or two ago in Dallas, a tiny little intimate club setting, and they tore the whole place down. I was like, wow. But I mean, they've had great stuff over the years. But Lane, you've heard of Norma Jean, right?
Yeah, for sure. Actually, Matt, I think, showed me that album. He's the one that introduced me to it. But yeah, they're pretty their live stuff's like there's a lot of passion behind it. I was like, dang, this is like they're throwing down.
Passion is a good word to describe them because
their live.
Go ahead.
I was saying their live show is literally killer. He knows how to get the crowd into it. It's one of those things where they interact with the crowd, and it makes you feel good because with them starting out in the early 2000s, and back when they used to swing the guitars around and stuff and just do crazy shit on stage, and they still do that to this day. So I think that's really cool as their live setting. Like they don't forget their roots. They go crazy when they play. And they're tight too. They're very tight. Mm-hmm. So I think I love that about them. I think they're one of the best live bands out there right now, as far as and consistent. So,
well, I mean, with all the member changes they've had, I've kind of noticed the difference in style over the years. Like while staying consistent, they've kind of shown you different angles of the band, and that's really interesting to see because not a lot of bands get to do that.
Yeah, and a lot of bands, I mean, in their scenario of going through so many members and being able to be consistent with their sound and showing different angles and stuff, and to pull it off as well as they do, that takes a lot of skill. Like, and they all the members that came through that band, they had it, and they're still killing it to this day, which is really, really cool, and I really admire that about them because. Every I don't think there's one album I don't like by Norma Jean, honestly. I love every album they put out.
Oh, I remember jamming.
I have more favorite.
Hey.
Yeah.
I was first getting into heavy music. Like Norma Jean was one of the first bands. Them and like Gwen Stacy and a couple other those like,
I remember Gwen Stacy.
Yeah, just so under the radar, but so good. And Redeemer and Anti-Mother, like. Those are the albums that, like, when I think of Norma Jean, those are the ones I go to. Not so much the new stuff, but like those three are like the ones.
Yeah, Redeemer's in the top for me. Like, I still love that album. I watched them play that album front to back actually in Dallas, and they killed it. Honestly, like it was fantastic to hear all those songs and even hearing how they play it now with different members from when they recorded it. It was. Because it was recorded, I believe, in 2006. Yeah, 2006. Yeah, when that album came out. And for them to play it now and still have it sound like current, but it still sounds like that album. Yeah. I think it's really cool how they did that. And they have it going on with that. So I love when they play that album. It's one of my favorite albums. And it's definitely at the top of my list. So.
All right, Lane, what do you have?
I'm talking about Norma Jean too. No, I'm just kidding. So my song is actually, it came from, I watched a documentary the other day featuring Tom DeLonge, the ex-frontman of Blink-182. The documentary is called Pursuit of Tone, if you want to go check it out. It's about an hour and a half to 2 hours long. So it's kind of lengthy, but it's worth the watch. You can go watch on YouTube. But anyway, he talked about his, side project, Angels and Airwaves, which has kind of blown up. I mean, not as popular as Blink-182, obviously, but a lot of people have heard of them. But I want to specifically talk about the song The Adventure. I don't know if you guys have heard it. I mean, it's been around since, I think, mid-2000s, because I heard it in high school first. So it had to come out sometime then. But basically, in the documentary, he talked about the history of it and why he did it. A lot of people thought he was like crazy for leaving Blink-182. And he basically, I mean, like any frontman, they eventually have to take time off to, kind of do their own thing, their own style. And in my opinion, I think he did that really well. Because I mean, he was with Blink for a long, long time, nonstop, and not putting out stuff in between, which I think he honestly got burnt out. Not to say he didn't like being with Blink-182, but he got to the point where, he wasn't able to go out and do things on his own. That's basically what he was explaining why he did Airwaves. So it's kind
of I've been jamming them a lot lately, honestly. I've been jamming them a lot.
Yeah, me too. A song of theirs came up the other day. I think it was Rebel Girls, the name of it. And when I heard that, I was like, oh man, like it just unlocked like a secret memory. I was like, I forgot like completely. Like it's one of those bands like you don't forget about it because you remember listening to it, but then you're like, when you hear it again, you're like, oh my god, like why did I stop listening to them? Like it's so good.
Yeah, they put out a song that I was a big fan of called "Kiss and Tell."
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Very, very good song. I think Tom's songwriting is fantastic.
Oh yeah, some of the stuff he was doing in Angels and Airwaves, he was talking about how like he literally got like a tissue box of like rocks and metal and just random stuff to incorporate in it, and like their producer even got like a filing cabinet that was opening and closing it. He's like, you hear that sound it's making? And they incorporated that into the sound, and I was like, what the heck? Who would just think to do something like that? It's just so
that's cool though. That's so cool.
Yeah, no, it was really cool because I wondered because there's like I think it's the very first chorus. It's a down chorus, and it's like there's some background noises going on. I'm like, how could like a keyboard or any other instrument like make that? And that explains it because like it's those noises they just randomly came up with and threw in there on top of like a layer of whatever synth or something. And I was like what the heck? Like how do you make that sound?
Like they started like popping bubble wrap at the beginning, or like squeaking styrofoam.
That's like
that'd be cool though. That'd be cool though.
They look at all this technology and like, I like this, but this cardboard box is looking a lot better, It's like what?
Like, don't play. Get on this cardboard box with a stick. Let's see what that.
Yeah, let's do that instead. We don't want this like thousands of dollars of equipment. Nah, that's not gonna help us. But yeah, it was cool just seeing his take on the adventure. You could see he was really passionate about it, and it was cool to like think back to the time I first heard it in high school and think about memories like that. And I was like, dang, like not kind of like it became more special to me after that. Like after hearing it, like at first I just heard it and was like, that's a good song because it just sounds cool and it's like well written. And now I'm like, oh, now I see the meaning behind it to him, and I'm like, dang, that makes it like super. What's the word?
Yeah,
it makes it that much more closer to your heart. So that's all I have to say about that.
It's the power of music.
That's right.
It's cool when you listen. It's cool when you listen to songs. It's cool when you listen to songs, and then whenever you hear it and you're first like, oh, it sounds cool, and then you listen to it again, and you're like, you start hearing different things whenever you listen to. You start hearing the deeper meaning on a lot of the stuff, and then you look at the lyrics and you understand the lyrics, and so that song just means a lot more by the end of it when you listen to it after like however many times. I think it's really cool how music does that in general. And especially with Angels and Airwaves, like the way they do that shit is really cool. Very, very cool.
Yeah, I think it's funny especially for musicians. Like when I first hear a song, I just sit there like a zombie, and so people are like, "Oh, do you just not like it?" And I'm like, "Well, no, I'm like digesting it. Like I'm listening. I'm like actually listening." Like some people nowadays, like especially like pop music, they just think, "Oh, it's a fun beat. I'm gonna dance along." But it's like if you really want to hear a song, like just sit there and just don't move, don't make, emotions or noise, just listen.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people don't want to take the time to actually listen to. A lot of people don't want to take the time to actually listen to the song. They listen to it, they hear the beat, and they're like, "Oh yeah," or whatever.
Or they automatically are like, discount it. Like, "Oh, nah, I don't like it." Next, and it's like you didn't even give it. You listened to it for 2 seconds.
They give you about like 30 seconds, and then they're like, "Yeah." I mean, I know because I've done it myself, so I mean it do be that way sometimes, but. I think actually listening to a song, you can actually get into, like, for instance, I'll go back. When I first heard Under Oath Erase Me album, I was not a fan at first. But
definitely an acquired.
But I actually started giving the song. Yeah, it was a very different feel. So I was just kind of like, and I wasn't basing off of other people's opinions. Like, I was really going to listen to it and try to give it a chance. And then I watched the documentary, the making of Erase Me, and I was like, okay, I see what they did there, and honestly they did a pretty cool job, and I do like that album a lot. I really do like that album a lot. There's like 1 or 2 songs where I'm kind of like still, but overall that album was very good as far as like changing the stance on how they took the songwriting and stuff like that. And so I thought that was really cool.
I love bands that constantly like challenge the listener and the fans with each album. I think that's a really great tool to use because it forces you from keep putting out the same album over and over and over, which I know a lot of bands make careers out of that. There's nothing wrong with it, but there is something about how your band evolves over time and how like each album becomes its own little time capsule in itself. You create something new, different, and the listener is kind of challenged by it. Like you were saying, at first you were like, I'm not sure about this, but then you listen to it over and over and over, and then you watch the documentary, so you even had more context. You're like, oh, okay, now I get it, and then you really get to decide whether or not you enjoyed it or not. But I love bands that continually, for sure, and I think those are the bands that continue to live on and evolve through many decades and many different eras instead of fade off, into obscurity because it's the same album. It's like, well, I've heard this one already,
Right. Yeah, it's funny you say that because, like, especially when Tom DeLonge left Blink-182, what was the name? California, that album with Bored to Death on it. When I first heard it, I was like, I automatically was just like, I'm not gonna like it because it's just gonna be different. I already know it. But now, like, Bored to Death is one of my favorite songs of theirs, just because I heard it over and over, and I was like, I mean, it's still Blink-182 though. Like at the end of the day, it still got all the instrumentals. I mean, and whatnot. So, yeah, it's just funny how that works out.
Yeah.
So yeah, there you go.
There you go.
There you go.
All right.
There you go.
I'll go ahead and talk about mine. So the album that I have to talk about is from the band called Neck Deep, and their album is called All Distortions Are Intentional. And basically, if you're not familiar with Neck Deep, they've been around for quite a few years. They really rose up to fame in the Warped Tour days, in the mid to late 2000s and early 2010s. So they've kind of really, planted their stake as like a really pretty well-known modern pop punk band. They've released at least 2 or 3 albums over their career, and each one is really interesting and kind of plays around with what pop punk is. They have some albums that are more aggressive and more upbeat. They have some albums that are a little bit more groovy or melodic, but then still has that, pop punk background to it. This new album is very cool and interesting for them as a band because it takes their normal modern pop punk style that they've, kind of played with over the years and kind of added this like throwback tweak to it. So like there's many different moments in this album that kind of feel like that the early days of pop punk music, as we know it from like the early 2000s, bands like Weezer, Hawthorne Heights. So stuff like that, you'll feel a little bit of flavor of that in some of these, modern pop punk songs that they've done on this album. Which is really interesting and cool because like I'll hear a guitar riff or a melody or a drum beat or something like that, and I'll be like, man, that takes me back. It has those moments like we were talking about earlier where you go back to an experience in your life and you're like, oh, that sounds so familiar, but like in a fresh new way. And so just a few songs on the album that stuck out to me. First of all, the opening track, Sonderland, it comes in hard hitting. It just like very powerful drum track, very powerful guitars. And his vocals have gotten so much better over the years as they've been doing this. So it's really created a really cool progression if you start from album 1 all the way up to now, what they've been able to do with their sound and for the modern pop punk genre. So that one was a standout to me. Some of their singles include Fall, which is a super catchy song and has a little bit of that early 2000s.
Yeah, I remember hearing that song.
The hook on it is, something you wouldn't expect. You would think, like, out of the context of that song, you'd be like, man, that's really cheesy. But then you hear it and you're like, that just works so well. And you're like, I love it.
Yeah.
And then
I know for sure.
Low Life is another one that stood out. And it happens to be the first 3 tracks that are just like, bam, 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 as you're listening to the album. So if anything, it draws you in to this.
I love when bands do that.
Mm-hmm.
To the point where you're just neck deep in the album. You're like, oh God, how did I get here?
Exactly. But it definitely like uses those first 3 tracks to just like capture you inside this album and be like, no, you're going to stay and you're going to listen to the rest of this because it's awesome.
Yeah.
Because God said so.
God said so.
Yeah, I've actually only listened to the singles off the album. I haven't listened to it top to bottom yet.
I've listened to the singles on it. Honestly, I really like Neck Deep, and I respect the hell out of them because they can put on a live show. I remember watching them at a So What Festival in 2017, I believe, and they killed it. They were tight. They put on a show. The production was fantastic. I was very impressed with Neck Deep. So yeah, they got it going on. They got it going on for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm pretty sure I've seen them a couple times over the years at Warped Tour. Like I wasn't as familiar with them at the time, but I always remember like either walking by the stage they're performing on, or like waiting for another band, and I would see them perform in front of them, or after, and be like, "Wow, these guys have got some energy." So definitely in that aspect, and then throwing it into an album like this, which has some high energy songs and some really good ballad type songs within the pop punk genre. It's really, really cool, and it's a nice little journey. And even each song connects so well. I love whenever each song is very intentional on an album, and like one thing leads into the next, whether that could be, the way that the dynamics of a song goes into a next song, or like how it ends and then ramps up for the next one or leads into. I love when albums do that. And so I would definitely give this one like a 10 out of 10 because this has got to be my favorite one from them so far.
I've seen it back in 2017, I think at Texas Motor Speedway. I was with Clinton. There's bands like Of Mice and Men, Neck Deep, Avenged Sevenfold. There's like Pierce the Veil. I mean, there's some big bands there, but there's people that came just to see Neck Deep, and like they had a pretty good crowd. And I was like, dang, I didn't realize they were like, I mean, I knew they were popular, but like I didn't realize they had that big of a crowd. That was pretty crazy to see.
It's massive.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What were you gonna say, Matt?
I was saying, I forgot.
Oh.
Dang it. I forgot what I was going to say.
My apologies.
It's all good.
Just try to remember. That way you won't forget.
Gotcha.
I mean, do you have anything, on the topic of Neck Deep or any of the albums that have stood out to you in the past and how they kind of compare to this one?
So my favorite, well, I don't know about album, but the song of theirs was A Part of Me, because it's kind of a slower song of theirs, mainly just vocals and guitar, but that was one of the first songs Danielle and I like listened to together when we first started dating. And I was like, I told her, I didn't realize like you like this kind of music. She said, oh yeah, it's like one of my favorite songs. And I was like, I was like, okay, well, like, you got my vote.
The box right there.
So check. But yeah, so that song really is close to me. As far as I really haven't listened to any of their albums like as a whole, top to bottom. It's just been singles here and there. So I
highly recommend starting from the beginning and kind of hearing the progression, because they're still a fairly young band. Like they don't have like 18 albums out. There's roughly like 4 to 5, I think.
Yeah, I was gonna say they really don't have a whole. I mean, they have enough. They're definitely starting to gather momentum. So yeah, it'd be interesting to hear what they put out like from here on out. It's only getting better.
But yeah, if you have not heard All Distortions Are Intentional, you should intentionally listen to it and enjoy it.
You shall.
Okay. Let it be said, let it be done.
All right.